My favorite country, not. Okay. But there were good reasons for that. We'll talk about that. But we have so much to discuss today. We're going to be discussing Ben Shapiro's announcement that he's doing a docu-series on Pope Pius XII, the man who was called Hitler's Pope, the man who between 1939 and 1945 never once condemned the Holocaust publicly. Everyone begged him to. He refused. He also was the first, as the Cardinal Secretary of State, Eugenio Pacelli. He was papal legate to Germany. He signed the first treaty with Adolf Hitler. He's the one who legitimized Adolf Hitler. And when the war was over, not only did he not once condemn the Holocaust, but he actually presided over the greatest kidnapping in the history of the world. There were about 40,000 Jewish children who, God bless them, were hidden by our Catholic brothers and sisters in monasteries and orphanages, and they were baptized. And they asked the Pope Pius whether these children could be returned to their families, and he said no, that if they're baptized, they're no longer Jews, they're Catholic. We'll get to all of that. But let's move away from Catholicism for a moment. Catholicism represents 1.3 billion people worldwide. Then you have 900 million Protestants. And among Protestants, they kind of divide into probably 600 million of what we call the mainline denominations, Lutheranism, Episcopalianism, many of them kind of a little vanilla. You don't see the kind of passion that we see in the other 300 million approximately, which are evangelical Christians. The great story of modern American politics is the rise of evangelical Christianity. It started as a movement in the U.S. I mean, it kind of went on and off. There was always strong evangelical Christianity. In fact, there were a lot of the abolitionists that led to pushing Lincoln in the Civil War, etc. That was all evangelical Christianity. Then it kind of died out in the 20s, the Roaring 20s, and it came back with one man. And his name was Billy Graham. And in 1945, right after the war, he started doing these giant crusades. People thought he had lost his mind. But believe it or not, he actually began to reach a lot of lives. He would open like a circus, I mean, literally like a giant circus tent in places, of all places, Los Angeles, near Hollywood. And then he grabbed the attention of one man, whose name was William Randolph Hearst. He was the most powerful newsman in the world, and especially in the United States. You've all heard of him. You've heard of Hearst Castle. Until today, we have Hearst Media. And William Randolph Hearst went to one of his sermons, and he wrote to all of his editors that night, and he wrote, "Puff Graham, start promoting Billy Graham." And Billy Graham becomes almost single-handedly responsible for kind of amalgamating all these small evangelical Christian movements that were beginning that didn't number more than maybe 10, 20, 30,000 in the United States, building called Born Again's, now more evangelical. Then something even more unexpected happened, which is that they emerged as the single greatest friends the state of Israel has ever had. I want to state on the record, because everything here is on the record, that if the American Jewish community supported Israel with the same level of passion, stalwartness, and unconditional support that the evangelicals do, then Israel would not be going through the tough time that it's going through right now, where the Jewish pro-Israel, we're 6 million Jews in America, maybe only 10% of us are what we call the pro-Israel community, people who fight for Israel, maybe 600,000. The evangelicals, we've got tens of millions. Look at Marco Rubio. Even though he's Catholic, he still comes under the evangelical means you feel you have a special personal relationship with Christ. Look at Ambassador Mike Huckabee. And finally, look at my buddy Dave Maitland, who I met here on this boat. We can't say where we are because people are trying to kill me all over the world, so I'm somewhere in Germany, but then again, the Germans have tried to kill us and have killed the Jews for most of our history, so it's not like they can inflict even greater damage. But David, you and I have had the most fascinating conversations on this trip. Why, as a Christian, do you love Israel?
Well, I want to ask you some questions first, if that's all right.
You can't ask a rabbi questions.
I've been doing it all week, and you've been such a great sport. Don't spoil me now.
No. We're gonna. If you answer that one question, because you guys live in Colorado, and you guys live in, I'm not going to say exactly where, but you guys live in Colorado, and you live in one of the, kind of the Bible belts. A lot of people think the Bible belts are Tennessee and North Carolina. Actually, Colorado has one of the highest concentrations of evangelical Christians. Do they love Israel, and why?
Well, I think Israel is one of the things that's in the Bible, which we believe in. The Bible is our law. That's it. That's all we have is the Bible. We don't have any peripheral things at all to go by. And Israel is mentioned throughout the whole Bible. And so to believe in the Bible, you have to believe in the Jews. And the Jews have become Israel. Whether it was way back when, and that's part of my questions, is God given Israel to Jews? And some of the things that's happened, how did they acquire Gaza, for example? How did they acquire the Nolan Heights? And so there's several things like that. As a Christian, we would like to learn about from a Jewish, and I appreciate you giving us this time.
No, and I appreciate your caring to know. There's a big debate going on in the Jewish community right now with all the criticisms of Israel and the worldwide condemnations, even though the Jews are the ones who were, of course, attacked October 7th. I don't want to mention all the horrors, but some of them are that children were literally beheaded. I was in it's called Otif Gaza, the envelope around Gaza. I was there a week after the attacks. I saw the bodies still reeking as they decomposed under the hot sun, covered in nothing but a azaka, a plastic sheet. You're talking women whose breasts were cut off and the terrorists played baseball with them. You're talking about women shot in the genitalia. You're talking about massive gang rape. You're talking about Thai workers in the pumpkin seeds, the lettuce, the pumpkin fields, the lettuce fields, who were decapitated with hose. So that's horrors that we can. And who's being blamed today for the war? The Jews. And there's a debate in the Jewish community. Is this because anti-Semitism is endemic in the world, and no matter what happens, they're always going to blame the Jews? Or is it because we Jews have not done a good enough job of explaining and answering questions like yours? How did Israel take possession of Gaza? How did Israel take possession of Judea and Samaria, the Golan Heights? And for someone like yourself, you're not an anti-Semite, you're a huge supporter of Israel. But I feel that there are some people that no matter how much explaining we do, it's almost like we have to explain our existence. But I do want to answer your questions because I think that they're very sincerely stated. That make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So should we start with Gaza?
Sure.
Okay, so let's go back to ancient Israel. But this is no long histories. I'm not pulling a Tucker Carlson with Putin. Remember, he asked him a question and then Putin answered it for like 75 minutes. It was the most boring TV ever. And Tucker Carlson saying, just don't kill me. Very simple history. So Abraham comes, God promises him the land. The Jews go down to Egypt. They come back with Joshua. They conquer the land. And but they always had one major adversary, and that was the Philistines. And there's always these stories about and Samson and Delilah destroying, and they finally, and King Saul, of course, is killed by the Philistines. He really falls on his own sword, quite literally. That's where the expression comes from. But it's Philistines. So the Philistines are then destroyed by the Jews, and they disappear for 1,000 years. And now you have 1,000 years. The first temple, which was 3,000 years ago, and then lasted 500 years. Then you have the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians, rebuilding of the second temple under Cyrus, and then its destruction by the Romans. So you have 1,000 years of the Jews in Israel. Now think about how long that is. America's about to celebrate its 250th birthday. We're the most powerful nation in the world. We're not even a quarter of a millennium old. The Jews had 1,000 straight years there, okay? Interrupted just by 70 years. But then the Romans come, and they are the superpower of the time. And Hadrian hates the Jews to the core. By the way, interestingly, one of the reasons Hadrian first liked the Jews, but the rabbis criticized him because he famously had a young boy lover who wasn't even old enough to be of consent, and that boy died. And Hadrian put statues of him all over the Middle East. If you do a Nile river cruise, you'll see those statues till this very day, and he was criticized by the rabbis. So he turned on the Jews, defeats the Bar Kokhba revolt, and he now takes a name that has not been used for 1,000 years. Philistina. Remember, the Philistines had disappeared a millennia ago. Yeah. So So the Romans take an ancient name, Philistina, and they resurrect it only in order to get rid of the name that they've given to the Jewish province, which is called Judea. It was the Romans who called it Judea. We Jews called it Israel. They called it Judea. But now Hadrian wants the Jews forgotten. So he recreates the name Palestina. There is no connection between Palestinians and the ancient Philistines, not in DNA, not in anything. They are not descendants, they're Arabs from Arabia. I'm gonna connect this a little bit better. Hang on, guys. The vagaries of doing shows while we travel, but also the miracle of it. Just hang on one second and I will fix this. Okay. I'm gonna fix this, and we're gonna just hang on one second, everyone. Stay. Okay, are we back? Johnny, can you text me? Johnny's our New York producer. He produces the show when I'm in my studio in New York, and he's producing now. Johnny, can you just text me that we're on? Johnny, just text me right now if we're on. Johnny. For all of you who are watching, see, they're starting to come back. I have a much better connection, so you'll be able to hear us better. Johnny, okay, good. Johnny, okay, audio is good. Great, good. Okay, so again, Hadrian resurrects the name Palestine, and he takes the Jews and he scatters them throughout Europe. He actually dislodges the entire population, and they come as sex slaves to Rome. They come as the way the Nazis would do it, slave laborers. And they're spread out, Belgium, France. And that's why you have so many Jews in all these areas that we have been visiting. But because the Jews are not, then Rome falls apart after it becomes Christian, and then the Jews start getting persecuted all over Europe. They want to go back to Israel. For 2,000 years, they want to go back to Israel, but they don't have any political power. How are they going to get back? They have no money. They have no army. They have no national movement. All they have is their religion. So they build these communities, all the ones that you've seen, the synagogues, but they're all killed in the First Crusade. That was in 1086. Second Crusade, 1244. Then the Europeans start killing them with the most ridiculous assertions ever, like that the Jews are poisoning the wells of Europe and creating the bubonic plague, creating the Black Death. 1 out of 3 Europeans died in the Black Death, and they blamed it on the Jews. So not only did the Jews die at a rate of 1 out of 3, they then came and massacred the rest of the Jews. Then they came up with a new lie, which really boggles the imagination. Like that city we were at Rothenburg, they killed 450 Jews. They cut out their tongues. They castrated them. They raped their women. And you know what the accusation was, why they did it? They said that the Jews were going into the Catholic churches and taking the host, taking the wafers that are used in communion, in transubstantiation, which is now the flesh of Christ, and they were torturing a cookie, torturing the wafer in order to torture the body of Christ. I mean, you're talking about allegations that are so frickin' insane, desecration of the host. And that wiped out all that allegation that Jews were walking around with hammers beating up cookies in wafers in churches leads to the annihilation of Jews in Germany. So more time goes by and the Jews said, you know what? There was always a small remnant of Jews of Israel, but we're going to finally go back to Israel. And we went back to Israel. And we wanted to share it with the Arabs. And we told the Arabs a million times, let's build a country together, Muslims and Jews together. But the Muslims were clear, no place for you here whatsoever. And the land was empty, it was barren. It was flea infested and lice infested and mosquito infested. Mark Twain, the greatest American writer that ever lived, took a journey through the Holy Land of Israel, and he actually wrote in his diary, I've never seen such desolation. He said, we went 3 weeks without seeing one person. They were thinking that at the time that if the Jews created a state, that it might be able to sustain 300,000 to 400,000 people. Today, it easily sustains 11 million people with one of the most prosperous. Israel is now the 3rd highest per capita income nation in the world. Okay, which brings us fast forward, but Israel's still tiny. 1967, another Nazi Arabist, Islamist named Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was the president of Egypt, decides, I'm going to annihilate, I'm pushing all the Jews into the sea. He declares war. Israel wins the war in 6 days. And they conquer vast areas of land. It was forced on them. They never even wanted them. And Gaza was one of them. Now Israel has control of, let's say at the time, 800,000 Palestinians in Gaza. Today it's maybe 1.8 million, which just shows you what an incredible genocide the Jews perpetrated. Their population tripled under the Jews, but we're guilty of genocide. I mean, it's almost like, there were 12 million Jews in Europe before the Holocaust, 6 million after. Can you imagine if the Jews had accused Hitler of genocide, if we were 12 million and we ended up with 18 million? That's not a genocide. Okay. Even then, Israel decides to withdraw in 2005. Yesterday was the exact 20th anniversary of Israel's complete withdrawal under Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. I remember that well because Debbie, who's holding my wife, our 2 wives are sitting in front of us. Debbie's cousins lived in Gaza under IDF protection. And the IDF came and destroyed their house. Not Arab homes, Jewish homes. The IDF came and forcibly removed them, picked them up, forcibly moved them out, destroyed their home, and said, we're giving it to the Palestinians. We don't want Gaza anymore.
This was in Gaza?
This
or
was in
Golan Heights?
this was in Gaza first, 2005. 20 years ago, yesterday was the exact 20th anniversary. It was August in 2005. And what are then the Palestinians got triple the amount prorated to today's money, triple the amount of money from international organizations like the European Union, the United Nations. The United States gave billions of dollars to Hamas, which won an election in 2006. They won it through corruption. They threw most of the other candidates off rooftops, etc. But even so, America gave them billions, altogether tens of billions. Per capita, per Palestinian that was there, it would have been like $100,000. You know what Hamas did with that money? They didn't build hospitals. They didn't build universities. They didn't build schools. They built bombs. They built a tunnel network for their terrorists, which is larger than the New York subway system. New York is the richest city on earth. Just imagine what it takes to build a subway system in the middle, a tunnel system, bigger than the New York subway system. They stole all their money. That was part of it. Then Ismail Haniyeh, and they all became multi-billionaires. Ismail Haniyeh was just assassinated by Israel in Tehran when he went for the funeral of the president of Iran who died in that helicopter. He died being worth $7 billion, this freedom fighter. I mean, say what you want about Che Guevara, but I don't know if he died with like $7 billion. Yasser Arafat died with $5 billion. Okay. And that's what this war is about. Because Hamas has a genocidal ideology. It's a Nazi ideology that no Jew anywhere on earth is allowed to live, including in the United States. The Hamas charter does not say that Israel has to be destroyed. It says that every Jew anywhere in the world, in Colorado, in New Jersey, in New York, in Indonesia, has to be murdered. It even says, in the Hamas charter, it says, "O Muslim, Israel has had, since forcibly removing the Jewish population of Gaza in 2005, they've had 6 wars. How many wars can you have? And they have these 6 wars because every time they try to fight Hamas, the world falsely accuses them of humanitarian atrocities, and they can't finish the war. So it's almost like Patton and Montgomery and Bradley crossing the Atlantic with like 2 million American troops, storming the beaches of Normandy, and then the UN says, "No, you gotta stop," for like a year. So they stop. And then the Nazis come and kill everyone in Paris. So they start again. "Oh, you gotta stop." You don't fight wars like that. Yeah. You fight a war until the frickin' end, and you demand unconditional surrender, and then you get rid of the Nazis like we did in 1945, and then you have peace in Europe for 70 years.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
On the news this morning, in Israel, a lot of the people were doing a protest for them to stop the war in Gaza.
Yes.
And they said, "Stop the war and get
the hostages
back." But Hamas, if all the Israeli troops left Gaza, Hamas not going to give the hostages back, are they?
No, not only are they not going to give them back, they're literally starving them to death. They're putting out videos of the hostages digging their own graves. The psychological torture of these brutes, of these barbarians, these monsters, to get a man to dig his own grave. By the way, that's what the Nazis used to do all over here in Germany. They made the Jews dig their own graves. Babi Yar, 33,000 Jews shot and killed in 2 days. Ehrenfest, which was, talk about cynicism. Here in Germany every year, they have something called the Harvest Fest. So they have the Harvest Festival we saw with the vineyards, etc. They decided to have a Jewish Ehrenfest. They tried to set a record, and they killed 43,000 Jews in Majdanek in 2 days. And they would make them dig their own graves, and this is before the gas chambers, and they would just shoot them, and that's what they're doing now in Gaza. Yeah. But here's the problem. Let me just answer your question about the Golan Heights. So the Golan Heights is the same thing. The Golan Heights was captured in the 1967 war.
Yeah,
because,
so it's
again,
won by war.
Right. So if I can use my glasses here, because I'm old. I'm a lot older. You're a spring chicken. I'm like a freaking old geezer over here, okay? If this is Israel, it's very small. So this is the Golan Heights at the top, okay? This is Gaza right here, okay? Gaza was conquered from Egypt and with all of Sinai. The Golan Heights, 3 Arab countries. Remember, Israel is 6 million Jews, and the Arabs, and 3 million Muslim Israeli Arab citizens who are not drafted. They don't have to fight in wars, unlike my sons and my daughter have been fighting this war for 2 years. So Israel is usually fighting 200-300 to 1 odds. 6 million. Do you know that the Arab nations that surround Israel, I don't know if people know the statistic. The Arab countries that surround Israel are 631 times bigger than the state of Israel. I want to repeat that. Israel is so just in size
area,
first.
In area.
In population, there's about 500 million Arabs. So whoever's good at math, do the math. Or we can say 1.3. Listen, not all Muslims say Israel, but God forbid. But there's the biggest religion in the world is Christianity, because by the time you put together 1.3 billion Catholics and 900 million Protestants, you get 2.1 billion people. The second biggest is Islam, 1.7, 1.9, and it'll slowly take over Christianity and become the world's biggest religion. So Israel's fighting usually 300 to 400 to 1 odds and winning. And Israel right now was fighting Syria, Lebanon, Hezbollah, Iran, Hamas, Judea and Samaria, the Houthis, a 6 frickin' and winning. I mean, this is miraculous times, like straight out of the book of Deuteronomy that we Jews are reading right now. So Syria attacked from the north. They attacked with 3,000 tanks on the day of Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. That's Gaza.
What time frame?
1967.
67. Yeah.
Right. The Syrians attack. Israel crushes them and gets the Golan Heights.
And it's strategic.
Very strategic. Exactly.
Overlooks.
That's exactly right. And before Israel's capture, and it was very hard to capture it because they were fighting uphill. You never want to fight uphill. In every battle, you want to have the high ground. So, and what the Arabs in Syria did is that they would use the Golan Heights prior to its conquest in 67, and they would just fire tons of missiles and grenades and ordnance onto the farm villages. You know, most of Israel is agricultural. So then Israel captured it. Thank God they captured it, because of course Syria would later fall to like ISIS. That whole area became ISIS. And then Bashar al-Assad would become the greatest murderer of Arabs in the history of the world. Bashar al-Assad, who just fell because of Israel, 6 months ago, killed 600,000 Arabs since 2011. Now just imagine those numbers. Even if you accept the worst numbers of what Israel's accused of a genocide right now, even if you take all the Hamas numbers, which are fudge, which are a lie and a fabrication, let's say they're true. They say that Israel killed 60,000 in this war since October 7th. That's Hamas numbers, without distinguishing between civilians and combatants. So, does that explain a lot about God? So Judea and Samaria is where there's a lot of fighting, because Israel has a lot of self-inflicted wounds. What they should have done with Judea and Samaria, let's say when Israel conquered Judea and Samaria, they took control of the ancient biblical lands where everything happened. The tabernacle was with Joshua, King David, King Saul, up until Solomon builds the temple in Jerusalem. Remember, that's built by Saul, not by David. David was a man of war. He wasn't allowed to build the temple. And if Israel took control at the time of, let's say, 700,000 or 800,000 Palestinians in that belligerent war that was forced on them by Jordan, what they should have done was given them local autonomy without federal autonomy, meaning Puerto Rico, for example. Puerto Rico is an American territory. Puerto Ricans vote. They control all their own affairs, their own governor, but they have no congressmen, they have no senators. So they don't have representation. But because of that, their taxation is very minimal. It's like 4%. We Americans, we're paying 35, 40% of the federal. Our tax burden in places like New Jersey and New York is 50, 60%, right? And that instead, what Israel did is they brought Yasser Arafat in the Oslo Accords and let him have dominion there. And he was a killer. So all he did was foment greater and greater unrest. And you have two kinds of our Arab brothers and sisters. You have Arab brothers and sisters like in the United Arab Emirates, in Bahrain and Morocco, that want to live in peace with Israel. That's the Abraham Accords. And then you have the Muslim Brotherhood, which is Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, Iran, mostly funded by Iran. And they just want dead Jews. And they get off not on seeing their own countries prosper, like in Dubai. If you've been to Dubai, it's like being in Manhattan. It's beautiful. It's incredible. They get off on just seeing their Jews die. And they will spend their entire lives just to kill us. And that's why Gaza is such a crap hole. Gaza was a crap hole before this war. I was in Gaza. I took the Reverend Al Sharpton to Gaza. He met Arafat. I refused to shake Arafat's hand. That was 2001. It was a crap hole back then, because they're not investing in their people. They're investing in murdering Jews. It's one of the reasons that Hitler lost the war. Hitler's soldiers, the first major defeat, here, you want to use this for the light? Hitler's first major defeat was in Stalingrad, in Russia, on the Volga River in 1942. And his field marshal, Paulus, he had not had one defeat against the Russians. So why did he lose that battle? Because it was freezing cold. It was November, December 1942. And his soldiers had no blankets.
Winter gear, yeah. The Russians were used to the conditions.
Right.
They had the big bear skins and everything.
Right.
The Germans had very light uniforms.
And they had no food, and they had no clothing, and they had no armor. Now why? Because Hitler decided he's going to use the trains not to bring supplies to Paulus and his army. He's going to use the trains to bring the Jews to Auschwitz. He was prepared to destroy his own country as long as he killed enough Jews. And that's the Muslim Brotherhood mentality. Hamas is the same. Hamas wants Palestinians to die. The more Palestinians die, the more Israel gets condemned at the UN.
So how do we change that? How do you get a different image?
You get rid of Hamas. You got to.
The people in Gaza know where the Hamas is.
Of course they do. Of course they do.
So,
you know, the people of Gaza have not even risen up against Hamas.
Yes,
Why?
That's a question. Why?
Well, maybe because many of them, unfortunately, share that ideology. It's very sad.
Goodness me.
I mean, it's very different to the Arabs. It's not a universal Arab mentality. It's not what Abu Dhabi thinks. It's not what Dubai thinks. It's not even what Saudi Arabia today thinks.
Yeah.
I think Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, wants peace with Israel. They're just, they're stopping him. They're making him feel, we'll topple your regime. You know, and how much can, you know, he's also a marked man. Don't think that these Arab rulers don't know that they're also marked men, just like the Jews are. They fear the Muslim Brotherhood. But I want to tell you one final thing about the hostages. You know, once upon a time, the real threat to America was the Soviet Union. When I grew up, you guys remember we did all those drills, he had to get under. We were afraid of a Soviet nuclear attack on the United States. It all changed with one incredibly weak, pathetic president. And I don't like speaking bad of the dead, especially because he's not even dead 1 year. But one of the three worst presidents in American history was a man named Jimmy Carter. He was weak. He was pathetic. Funny thing is, he called himself an evangelical Christian, but his values were anything but. I don't think the evangelicals in the United States embraced him and voted for him. But it started with hostages. He allowed the Shah of Iran to fall. Khomeini comes to power, and what's the first thing he does? He takes hostages. They storm the American embassy, and they take 55 hostages. And they hold them for how long? 444 days. And now America, the strongest nation in the world, is shackled by these hostages. We want to save our people who worked in the embassy, our diplomats, our Marines, and Carter takes no action. And that's the beginning of Islamism. And now today, the greatest threat to America, 9/11 wasn't perpetrated. The Twin Towers weren't knocked down by Soviets. They weren't knocked down by communists. They were knocked down by Islamists. They were knocked down by 19 Islamic terrorists. And it's never stopped. And the Islamists are excellent at always leveraging hostages. And they're doing it with Israel right now. What do you do? And tragically, I think what you need to do is free the hostages, not through the negotiations, but through military action. Because as soon as Ronald Reagan became president, the hostages were released not the same day, the same minute. Because Iran was terrified because they thought Reagan was cuckoo, and he was gonna and he developed that image of being cuckoo. Like, you don't know, I'm crazy. I'm a cowboy from California. I'm gonna frickin' nuke you. You better release them. But Carter was there. Like, can we talk? Can we negotiate? And he showed weakness. And these people don't understand anything but strength.
Strength, yes. Peace through strength.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would love your wife to repeat what she said, because it was really beautiful. You said, why do you love the Jewish people in Israel?
I have a love for Israel and the Jews because they are the ones that revealed the Lord our God, and through them came our Messiah, Jesus.
You know, we should have recorded that. I mean, we did record it. I hope we got it. Johnny, I want you to get that clip and post it. That was beautifully said. Can you say it again? Because I want to memorize it.
Through the Jews and Israel came the Lord our God and our Messiah, Jesus.
Okay. it could not be more simply and more powerfully and more eloquently stated than that. That the Jewish-Christian brotherhood connection, this soul friendship that I feel. I just published an article last week, my love affair with evangelical Christians, and the little video I did with your husband, which I hope doesn't cost him in terms of being a marked man by, I mean, Mahmoud and Abdullah and all you guys out there. No, by the way, I always make it clear, I love my Muslim brothers and sisters, and I have the greatest respect for Islam. It's Islamists that my issue is, the Muslim Brotherhood, because that's not a religion, that's a genocidal political ideology. But leave this man alone, okay? Keep on coming on. You know what? Leave me alone too. I've actually had enough. The Vienna thing was enough. The Brotherhood of Christians. So I titled our little video, "Why I Love My Evangelical Brothers," and because you know, but even you were not as eloquent as your wife, and that was just beautiful.
I never have been.
That was just beautiful. That our Christian brothers feel that through the Jews, their Lord, Savior, and Messiah came about, and Jesus was a Jew. And that's why you see an effort today by so many to make him a non-Jew. You had Pope Francis put a keffiyeh on baby Jesus in the manger in St. Peter's Square. Did you guys see that? Last Christmas, and the last Christmas he had here on earth. Baby Jesus for the Catholic Church was a Palestinian. I mean, and it's not just, you know, it makes a mockery of the Catholic Church. I love my Catholic brothers and sisters. First of all, historically, it's ridiculous. And I also want to be clear about one thing. For many of my Christian brothers and sisters who feel, but wait a second, didn't the Jews, okay, so maybe you gave us Christ, but you also killed Christ. Let me just be clear. The Jewish faction that collaborated with, it was the Romans who absolutely, of course, killed Jesus. It was Pontius Pilate. But the Jewish faction that collaborated with the Romans at that time, who I write about in my book, Kosher Jesus, were the Jews who hated being Jewish. It's the same kind of self-hating Jews that you see today condemning Israel. They were the Roman faction. They were the assimilationists. They were the ones who wanted to be more Roman than the Romans. They were like the Jews who changed their last names, the Jews who don't want to observe anything. And what they hated about Jesus is that he was a Pharisaic rabbi who was always quoting scripture. Look at what Jesus says when he's asked, what's the most important commandment? He quotes the Shema. You have to love the Lord your God with all your heart. That's what we Jews say 3 times a day. The Romanized Jews hated the Torah. They hated the Bible. They're the ones who wanted Jesus to have no influence. And that's why Caiaphas, the high priest, who was Caiaphas? He was an agent of Rome. Rome were the ones who chose collaborators. These were like Jews who collaborated with the Nazis during the Second World War. Caiaphas was a Roman stooge. He was a Roman tool.
They said they had no king but Caesar when they were confronted with who Jesus was.
Right, right. And Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 18, very beautifully, that those who do not keep every last letter of the Torah, of the law, will be the least in the kingdom of heaven. So the way I see it, we Jews connect to God with the Jewish God, whom Jesus worshipped his entire time here on earth. And then my Christian brothers and sisters, as you said very eloquently, were grafted onto the seed of Abraham. They were brought to the Jewish God through the agency of Jesus. And Maimonides wrote that the greatest rabbi that ever lived, Moses Maimonides, who was the personal physician to Sultan Saladin, the greatest Muslim conqueror of all time. Think about how things have changed. He was the advisor and the personal physician to the court and the king himself of Sultan Saladin. He wrote for those Jews who criticized Jesus, because a lot of Jews were very angry at the Christians back then. Remember, the Christians were marauding all over, the Catholics, all over Germany, like these places that we're seeing, and they were just slaughtering Jews. And Maimonides wrote, don't ever be upset at Christianity, because Jesus brought the knowledge of God to all the places that we Jews never reached. And for a Jew to write that 900 years ago, when most Jews perceived Christians to be our enemies. But look, we've come full circle, and now Jews and Christians are brothers like never before. And Trump made it clear. Why did he move the embassy from Tel Aviv? It was a joke. Israel's capital is Jerusalem. It has been since the time of King David. It's a city that is 3,000 years old. It's older than Rome. It's older than Carthage. And the American embassy was on the beaches of Tel Aviv. Great view. I used to visit the ambassadors there. I don't know how you get any work done when you see guys in European man thongs and women in bikinis, but this is what the ambassador used to look at. But then David Friedman and Donald Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. And do you think that Trump moved the embassy to placate the Jews who didn't vote for him? The majority of American Jews are Democrats. The majority of Orthodox Jews are Republicans. So who was the base that he was accommodating in moving the embassy? Evangelical Christians who stand with us. And I have to tell you, I don't know where Israel would be today without, and listen, we have the love of God. God will protect us. But in terms of the agency that God has chosen to protect Israel today, it's two main things. It's the IDF, greatest heroes since the Maccabees, people like my son, and then it's the love of evangelical Christians who shows, and that's why I reciprocate that love. And that's why we've spent so much time together. That's why I've been teasing you the entire time.
Well, I give it back. Don't worry.
because my love for my Christian brothers is so deep, and I spent 10 years writing my book Kosher Jesus, and when it came out, the Jewish community, many in the Jewish community, I should say, attacked me so. You have to go. You can Google the 2012. The stories were horrendous. It was almost like my kids wouldn't be able to marry in the Jewish community because I had become so toxic, so radioactive. Today, of course, the book is read by everyone. It's become a bestseller, and it serves as a theological bridge between evangelicals and Orthodox Judaism. But at the time, they thought I'd lost my mind. Rabbi Shmuley, one of America's best-known rabbis, an Orthodox Jew who wears tzitzis, keeps the Sabbath, Chabad, Hasidic Jew, wrote a book called Kosher Jesus, and the idea was I wanted my Christian brothers and sisters to understand the Jewish Jesus.
Yeah.
So I learned from my, not my personal friend, but Amir Safari, something like that is his last name. But he, on his podcast or something, showed what's really happening in Gaza and why those people don't stand up against the Hamas is because Hamas has such a grip on them, and they are dependent. Their prosperity and everything about their lives are dependent on Hamas.
And they're afraid of Hamas. Hamas will kill them, right?
Yeah, right.
But I have heard recently they're starting to rise up.
Yeah, but not enough, and I kind of don't blame them. They don't have machine guns. They will be mowed down by Hamas. Hamas, it's like, look, there is some, they should be hurt, God forbid, they're civilians, but there is some culpability on the part of the people of Gaza because many of the hostages are being hidden in civilian homes, and someone should get that message out of where they are. But I'm not going to blame the people of Gaza. I'm going to blame the people of Hamas. I'm going to blame Hamas. But let's look here in Germany, right? The United States, I believe America is the greatest nation in the world. I believe America is, I've always said to you, I believe that the Jewish people are God's chosen people to spread the message of God worldwide. And as you said, look, Jesus brought it to places, as Maimonides said, to places the Jews never even reached. Because the one thing that has plagued the Jews throughout our history is our own insularity. Look what Paul did. Paul took some of the greatest teachings and he wrote these beautiful epistles, and it spread throughout the world. And you kind of have to ask yourself, why didn't the Jews do that 1,000 years before St. Paul, right? I always ask myself that question. If I was alive, somebody say, hey, Paul, hey, give me a break here. Rabbi Shmuley's on the case, okay? So, I think the Jews are chosen spiritually to spread the word of God, 10 Commandments, faithfulness in marriage, honesty in business, charity, education, prayer, kindness. But I believe America is chosen by God to spread that message politically. I think America is the greatest political nation in the history of the world. I love America, and I think it's blessed by God. And I think when we stand with Israel, we're blessed with God, by God. And I think when we live as a moral nation, we're the most charitable nation. America rescued everything we're looking around from Hitler. And yet, this great nation dropped millions of tons of bombs on German civilians in the Second World War. So how do we put those two together. Greatest, most charitable, and most righteous nation. And yet they flattened half the cities we've seen on this trip.
Well, this one we're going to tomorrow, Cologne, they just wiped.
Oh, Cologne was flattened completely. Hamburg flattened completely. Berlin flattened completely. Let alone have Würzburg, Dresden, of course. And Dresden was the last month of the war.
Yeah, that's it.
And the answer is, first of all, it's very hard to say children are never culpable. I mean, they didn't have the technology. But first of all, you have to remember, Germany elected Hitler democratically.
Yes.
And they stood with Hitler to the last bullet of the last man. They even fought after Hitler died for another week. That's even when Hitler blew his brains up, they continued to fight. So that was the first thing. The second thing is, what William Tecumseh Sherman taught us in the Civil War, and he can rank as one of America's 2 or 3 greatest generals ever. I think in the Civil War he was even greater than Grant. Sherman believed in total war. He believed in scorched earth. He burnt Atlanta to the ground. Now, did he hate the Confederate civilians? Of course not. But he believed that you end a war by breaking the will of the people to fight.
Of course.
And that's why you have sieges. You have a siege, you starve your enemy. And yet Israel's not doing any of that. Israel's sending all this food in, and that's one of the reasons that the war's also going in, because Israel wants to be so moral. Israel has already delivered 2 million tons of food.
And I bet you Hamas got most of that.
Of course it did. They took 80% of it.
Of course they did. Yeah.
Listen, America did not
There
drop
won't be any
food
starving
parcels.
Hamas.
Yeah.
Well, look, they'll
No,
be
no,
down their
no,
tunnels
no.
and they'll be fat and you beauty.
By the way, that's exactly what Ambassador Mike Huckabee said the other day. He said, for most of the people in Gaza, they don't need Israeli food. They actually need Ozempic. But America, the most moral nation on earth, was not dropping food parcels on Dresden, and they were not dropping food parcels like Israel's doing right now on Cologne. They were dropping bombs. So what hurts us Jews is when we do tours like this, see, there's 3 Jews on this trip. There's me and Debbie, there's one more guy that we met. For the average person traveling, it's beauty, it's history, it's antiquity, it's the Middle Ages, it's stuff we don't see in America. America's a relatively modern country. For us Jews, it's pain and suffering. And for me and Debbie, it's just going and hearing how our brethren were slaughtered for the past 1,000 years. So while everybody is going to cafes, Debbie and I are looking for the remnants of the synagogue that was burnt down on November 9th, 1938, Kristallnacht. And then the synagogue that was burnt down in 1246 in the Second Crusade. And then the synagogue, and with the Jews inside it, of course.
Sure.
Right? That's what our trip has been. And then here we are, we finally have an army, 2,000 years after having no protection. We have our own army, and no American, I've discussed this with other, the MAGA base is very anti-American interventionism in the Middle East. And I tell a lot of Trump's cabinet secretaries that I'm friendly with, I said, remember, no American soldier has ever died defending Israel or ever fought for Israel. Ever. They fought in Iraq. They fought in Afghanistan. They fought in Lebanon. Even under Reagan, they were killed by Iran in Lebanon. Remember, 1983, 243 Marines were just blown to smithereens at 6 a.m. And you know what Reagan did? He hightailed it out of the Middle East. He didn't even fight back. That's one of the reasons until today I feel that Reagan's a little bit of an overrated president, because when you kill 250 American soldiers, I'm sorry, you got to pay a price. Those soldiers are our greatest heroes. They're the greatest Americans. And they can't die without some kind of retaliation or deterrence. But Reagan just frickin' left. But no Americans ever fought for Israel. The Jews fought for themselves. And all we ask is just let us get on with it. And even then, they're just condemned so much that they can't just get on with it. And I just feel enough Jews have frickin' died already. Enough. And we are the people of Jesus. And we shouldn't have to die anymore. Enough.
So how are we going to get these hostages back?
I only think it's going to come through military action. I don't think...
I believe that's too.
Israel is amassing 100,000 soldiers on its border right now. And, you mentioned that a lot of Israelis oppose this offensive. Of course they oppose it. They're sick of the war. They're sick of it.
Of course.
But this is not like Vietnam. You see, Vietnam was 15,000 miles away from the United States. It had no direct bearing. It was based on a flawed theory of dominoes. We said, well, if Vietnam falls, ultimately Cuba will fall, and ultimately Washington will be communist. It was a flawed theory.
Yeah.
I understand the hysteria at the time, but Gaza, I mean, you walk over Gaza with one step. It's on Israel's border. Now, if the Viet Cong was literally like in Virginia, America would not have hightailed it out of Vietnam. And that's the difference. Anyway, to all my Christian brothers and sisters, David here and I, with his friends, have had a really wonderful time together. And that's because I feel such a natural affinity of love, mutual values, and respect with my Christian brothers and sisters in general, and with my evangelical brothers and sisters in particular. And I want to say one final thing. You know, a lot of people say to me, you know, Shmuley, here you are, you're an Orthodox rabbi, you're the father of 9 Orthodox Jewish children. Your wife wears the Jewish sheitel, you know, you have the unkempt wild man beard, wild man. You got the tzitzis, you just got beaten up in Vienna. Everyone watched the video because you wear a yarmulke. Why do you spend so much of your time, maybe the majority of your time, with Christians? Why not your own community? Why not the Jewish community? Why do you spend so much time lecturing in churches? Why did you write Kosher Jesus? Why are you always speaking to... I'll tell you why. Because brotherhood, in my opinion, does not come down to shared DNA and genes, etc. I believe that brotherhood comes down above, I mean, of course, it's family. Let's be clear about that. Family is the most important thing. But I believe that brotherhood comes down to a shared faith, a shared values, and a shared destiny. And I think what Jews want today is what our evangelical Christian brothers and sisters want. We have the shared faith in one God, who is the Father of all humanity, who has bestowed infinite dignity on all of us, and hates terrorists, and hates those who erase the image of God through their actions. They become beasts of the field, monsters like Hamas, who don't deserve to live because they are an abomination to God. They share that with us. Because evangelicals are pretty damn tough Americans, and they constitute probably the majority of the armed forces of the United States of America. I hate when I read stories that they're teaching Bible classes on bases and that's not allowed. Teach more Bible on the basis, God willing. Number 2, I said a shared faith. Number 2, shared values. Evangelical Christians and Orthodox Jews, they want to see a more wholesome culture. We want to see a culture where a woman like Taylor Swift can succeed based on her incredible voice, her incredible talent, and not taking her clothes off like for her most recent album, which she just revealed a week ago, called A Showgirl, where it's just soft porn. It's just not necessary. Women should be allowed to succeed through dignity. We didn't ask John Lennon and Paul McCartney to like wear a jockstrap. We allowed them to play their damn guitars because they were that damn good. Evangelicals and Jews want to see a more wholesome culture, respectful of women, emphasizing marriage. We know that sex that is outside of marriage or adultery is actually not just a sin, it's actually really bad sex because you don't feel any kind of emotional nakedness. You might be physically naked, but emotionally, you're so inhibited. You're not with someone that you love. We know all this, and we want to see a culture where marriage is strengthened and where divorce is diminished. So that's shared values.
And family.
Marriage and family, of course. And family, and finally, the same shared destiny. Whether the arrival of the Messiah, and whether for our Christian, you know, me and Mike Brown always debate this. I'll tell you, David, we'll end with this. If the Messiah comes and it's Jesus and it's the second coming, or if he comes and it's the first coming, I think we'll finally work it out. And the world will be filled with the knowledge of God as the waters cover the ocean floor, as the prophet Isaiah says in chapter 11, the most beautiful chapter. Wolf shall lie with the lamb, all those great things. War will end, men will beat sword into plowshares. And then these disgusting terrorists will finally be destroyed, and people will not have to fear, and will live under the kingdom of God. And that's what we both, and that's why our two communities are so aligned. We're not divided through, I wrote Kosher Jesus because I wanted the Jews and Christians not to be divided by Jesus, but actually to be united through Jesus, even as we understand him differently. I understand Jesus as a great Jewish patriot who fought the tyranny of Rome and was warned by many times by the Pharisees, you must leave because Pilate seeks your life. That's in Luke chapter 13, verse 1. And I know that Christians might understand it differently, but I see him as the son of our people. So the whole idea of Jesus as a rebel to Judaism is not something that my book was there to destroy that myth and create that theological bridge. So, when are we booking our flights to Tehran?
The one way?
Right. That's right. And free lodging and free accommodation.
It might be the same time we're rising to heaven.
It might bring about a rising to the heaven. That's very true. But I hear that fried rat these days, very good vintage, like very good year. Okay, God bless you all. Thank you, David. Big hug.
All right.
God bless you. God bless you.